Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Just want to thank you all for joining today's panel, the next iteration or the continuing iteration of our Leading Patriots series. Really excited for this conversation, really about arts, entertainment, what's going on within those industries, dovetailing on some of the other content that we've been able to have over the last several weeks. I wouldn't say your host, at least one of the co-creators of this series. My name is Brett Josephson. I'm the Associate Dean for Executive Development in the School of Business at George Mason University. We started this series about 2.5 months ago now, and the idea was to bring together a group of leading patriots, leading Mason alumni, friends of Mason, friends of the school, who were going through serious issues within their industries, and to provide a platform to provide an opportunity to have a discussion of what goes on within key industry verticals, key sectors of our society, our industries, and to convene a group of people to really have those in-depth conversations about how they are leading their organizations and what they are going through right now. I'm really excited to be joined on the call by two Mason, incredible people of Mason, Christine Landau, who's the Director of Business Engagement in the School of Business, and the President-elect of the Alumni Association for George Mason University, as well as Dean Rick Davis of the College of Visual and Performing Arts, who will be moderating this conversation. I'm going to have Dean Davis introduce the two panelists, but before then, I ask Christine to give say a few words about the Alumni Association and why we went about doing these series. So Christine, you're up.
Terrific. Thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. And I too am super excited about this panel and all the ones we've had in the Leading Patriots series. It really has been an opportunity for us to highlight some amazing folks who have come through Mason, and some stay connected and some have gone on to do amazing things and come back and share their expertise and talents. So looking over the list of panelists today, I know it's going to be a fantastic opportunity. And as the president-elect of the Alumni Association, we are trying to ensure that we get every former and current Patriots voice in the process. We want to know what's important to you so we can continue these Leading Patriots events. We can get you engaged. It's interesting because we've got our panelists here from the East Coast to the West Coast, and in talking to Sarah before the panel started, as we were doing some pre-call discussions, and she talks about being in the center of Hollywood and some really awesome things that she's done, asked, what are we doing for Patriots out on the West Coast? So we are trying to do more regional activities. So if you are joining us from outside of the DMV area, do know that we are trying to make sure that we engage Patriots from all over the world, in addition to really reinforcing activities within the nation's capital, where we are housed. So I know there's so many exciting things to share here. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rick Davis to announce our panelists and begin our great discussion. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Brett. It's an honor to be part of this series and to engage with Mason alumni. One of the joys of a long career at Mason, which I am very pleased to be still engaged here at this university that I joined in 1991. So I guess I've been at Mason for more than half of its existence, and certainly more than half of mine, not on the planet, but in terms of my professional life. And to be talking today to two alums who both have done amazing work, and I want to just say a word or two about them, and then when we actually get into the discussion shortly, I'll ask them to say a few more details. But Sarah Raymaker graduated in 1993 with a bachelor's degree in something that she actually made up, and there's a story there that I hope she will tell, because it's pretty great. So Sarah was actually at George Mason already when I showed up in 1991, and we met and did some work together back in the day, and she is currently the chief operating officer of IM Media. Will IM's media company has had a great career as an artist agent in California, and is a producer, director, filmmaker, and so on. Claire Kelly is a graduate of the Master's in Arts Management, or the Arts Management master's program, as we now call it. Actually, I think you told me just earlier that you were a member of the first graduating class of that program. So that's quite a thing. 2006, I believe, right? And we started that program in roughly 2004, 2005. So that's fantastic. And I was very happy to be part of the founding of that program at Mason. Claire has had a fantastic career in the museum world, and she is the head of exhibitions at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. So we have two very distinguished panelists who have distinctly different but amazing vantage points on the issues before us today. So actually, I think before we dig into the issues, I would like to ask each of you just to expound just for a couple of minutes on your Mason experience and how it has been leveraged into your professional careers. Because I think since we're talking to a group of alumni, I think, and probably some current students as well, I think it's interesting to make those connections. So Sarah, since you are the what's the right word? Earliest, that's the right word, earliest alum on the panel. Let's start with you.
So I started at Mason in '89 as a pre-med student, funny enough. Always wanted to be in the arts, but I thought it was more practical to do something in, medical field or science. I lasted 1 year, one econ class at Mason, and I was done. And went to communications, did communications for a second, but I really felt that I couldn't find what I really wanted. So at the time we had President Johnson, and I wrote this letter to him and I asked to sit down with him, and I wanted to create my own major. And I came up with this idea of wanting to be in the arts, but not trying to be an actor. I didn't want to be a musician. I didn't have any talent. On the creative side, I wanted to do the business side, but there was nothing at Mason for me. So we had a meeting. He read my letter and he said, find a dean of a school to be your mentor, be your sponsor. And if you find a dean of a school to do this, I will let you create your own major. So at that point, Rick was just starting at Mason. And he sat down with this crazy kid over here and listened to my story. And he said, yes, let's do it. So for the last 2 years that I was at Mason, he sat with me and we came up with a plan. I was taking business classes, accounting classes. I took lighting, production. I even took music theory, just anything that I could have, because I knew I wanted to be an agent or a producer. And I knew I needed to have a general education of everything about the arts and the business side. So I graduated in '93. Rick gave me my diploma, and I was the first graduate of my own major, which I think we called arts administration. I don't remember what we actually called it, but I fell under theater. So that was my experience at Mason. And I really credit Rick for believing in me. And I mean, if I didn't do this major with Rick, I wouldn't have had the internships that I had. He let me go off campus the last 2 years and work at, I worked at Center for the Arts as the contractor for all the talent that came in. I worked at America's Most Wanted as the kind of field. I basically handled all the reenactments for all the crimes, which was hilarious. But if I wouldn't have had that experience, I probably wouldn't have ended up in Hollywood, and I probably wouldn't have had the education that I have now. And I do have to say, Rick made me light a few shows and he made me take lighting classes. I never thought I was ever going to use it until COVID hit. And we're heavily in production over here. I can't bring in crews. So we're all doing 30 positions, and I've been lighting like crazy and using all the education I got at George Mason by Rick, and finally using it now in my 40s. That's my
music to my ears, and it just validates the whole idea of a broad-based liberal arts education that you never know what's going to pay off and when it's going to pay off, but nothing's ever wasted when you have that attitude and those experiences. So, gosh, thanks for that trip down memory lane, Sarah. I'm so glad to.
Thanks for believing in me, because I mean, seriously, I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for you. So thank you.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And strangely enough, your arts administration experience, I guess, unintentionally or maybe not, bore fruit 10 years later when we founded the College of Visual and Performing Arts, and Dean Bill Reeder, who had a long career in arts management before he came to Mason, said, we really ought to have a formal arts management program. And so we cooked one up, and along came Claire Kelly to be in our first class, and she's done amazing things. Claire, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into our theme.
Okay, so my Mason career actually did start in a different area as well. I was starting in history back in the mid 90s. I was taking courses to actually get a master's in history to build on my art history and historic preservation degrees that I had already received. And so I ended up having to stop briefly because my mom was ill. But then when I came back to Mason in 2004, that's when the program had been launched in arts management. And I was like, this is really what I want, because it's going to basically give me the educational background to what I'm actually doing on a daily basis. So the program itself really solidified a lot of things that, okay, I'm doing this right where I am in my job, and I'm actually doing this the way I should be doing it. And it gave me the opportunity, because I am a federal employee, to actually experience some other areas through the educational program that I couldn't actually do as a federal employee. So fundraising, my internship was at Arena Stage, and I helped them when they were getting ready for their capital campaign to rebuild and expand the Arena Stage in DC, and to work in the development office there as part of my internship, which gave me another experience that I saw from my administrative work in the portrait gallery, but didn't actually have a hands-on with. And so it helped me to then expand what I did on a daily basis in my museum, but also understanding what other departments within the museum and within the Smithsonian in general are doing to help, the holistic approach of how we make things happen with the museum. So I probably was part of actually the second class that actually physically graduated from the program, but that was a great experience, and being able to do that and apply actually the courses that I had taken in graduate level as my electives to kind of marry both the history as well as the arts management portions, which actually works great because the portrait gallery is actually an art museum as well as a history museum. So both of those
Indeed.
are what we do here at the portrait gallery.
And an example on the graduate level of nothing being wasted, because everything
Exactly.
can be applied one way or the other. And also Claire is an example of one of the kind of students that we teach a lot in the arts management program on the graduate level, and that's a working professional who's taking the program part-time. So it's kind of like, I know that we're on a business school program here. We're taking up your airspace. So I think it's nice to know that I'm sure in our listening audience there are people who are doing the kind of executive track and are working professionals who are coming back to school for new experience, new information, new credentials, and so on. So that thank you both for that great intro. Now just want to tee up a couple of questions, and then without trying to be too organized about it, I'd like to get your thoughts about these things. We're here to talk first and foremost about the impact of COVID-19 on the arts industry and the different sectors that you represent. But it's an inescapable fact that COVID-19 happened, and then we had the upwelling of interest in social and racial justice that started to really percolate in May and June, and has now become an inescapable second wave of unrest and challenge that the arts industry across the board has had to deal with, just like higher education, just like every aspect of American society. And I'm finding in my work as dean, but also in my work overseeing from a comfortable distance, but as a supervisor, the work of the Center for the Arts and the Hilton Performing Arts Center, which are our big presenting venues. These two challenges are becoming more and more linked, and one is opening up opportunities in the other, and vice versa. And so if you're interested in talking about them together or separately, I'd like to sort of open that door as well. But let's start with the ostensible theme of the broadcast, and with chronologically the first big upheaval, which started to become obvious in March in our world. And Sarah, once again, since we started with you, and it's earlier in your day than it is in ours out in California, tell us about life in Hollywood under COVID.
So life is very strange. There's a little production that started up. I'm literally in the middle of East Hollywood, which is kind of, in between all the studios. The studios have not opened back up. Everything's shut down around, I think the governor shut the state down March 12th. And there's been all these contingency plans to get production back up. There's only 2 shows that are in production right now currently. That's The Voice and The Masked Singer, but they're having to submit COVID tests every 3 days. So if tests aren't coming back, they're having to pause production. It's proving to be extremely expensive. And we're not able to bring the crews back that we used to bring back on the larger studio side, but also the scripted television and film for next year is, they don't know what's going to happen. They can't bring those shows back yet. So the only thing that is shooting right now is variety and late night. Late night up until about 2 weeks ago, we're shooting out of people's houses and garages. And we did James Corden a couple weeks ago, and he was in his garage, as he called it. And they had set up the set to make it look like it was his actual set, but he was really in his garage doing everything by himself with little ring lights. And, everyone's found a workaround. We're over here at iMedia, we're very fortunate because my partner, Will.i.am, has built an incredible 60,000 square foot facility, and we have 2 sound stages and 5 recording studios. We have 200 coders on site, which are now working from home. The Black Eyed Peas put out a new album in June, and we couldn't stop it. We had to move forward. So we had to find ways to create content and still do late night television performances and Good Morning America. So what we did is we built an XR stage here, which is an LED box basically. And we built it in one of our buildings, and we basically just started shooting our own performances and shipping them to Good Morning America, James Corden, The Tonight Show. So everything that you've seen that's out there online, we did in our little studio here. I think it's interesting. Anybody can create content right now. That's the one thing that, technology has afforded us. So we over here believe in pivoting. You're always going to get thrown different situations. We don't know how long this COVID stuff is going to last, but we've been trying to pivot and adapt and just be more crafty and using our skills or learning new skills in order to keep putting out content, because there still is a need for content. People are at home and they want to watch things that are new and fresh and be entertained and learn and, tug at emotion. So we're just trying to do what we can to just keep it up. So that's basically what's happening here on the West Coast. We also cross over into sports. Sports is, I don't know what's going to happen. I think football's about to go down, unfortunately. But we're in a really, really tough time.
Well, it may mean that the Washington Nationals will be able to be World Series champions for 2 years now instead of just 1. So there may be a silver lining there. We'll come back to you. I wanted to ask you about the creation of that XR studio. So before I turn to Claire, I just wanted to open up that subject a little more. And is that something that you would have done anyway, or was that a COVID response that said, we need to do this quickly because we have to be able to self-produce on a level that is exportable?
Well, shortly after shutdown, we got a call from Budweiser to do this concert, and they had built a stage in the Valley. And we went over there, and it was all of our friends that would normally be on the road. It was our friend Smasher, who is the content guy from U2. It was Baz, who is, Pink's creative director and Ariana Grande's creative director. It was JT and Corey, who are the team behind Beyonce and Drake. And they were all like, we don't know what to do. We can't work. We have all this equipment and trucks, and we have nowhere to put it. We don't even know where to park the trucks. And so Will said, come load it in. So we loaded in basically a full arena setup in one of our buildings and just made it work. So it's kind of like what you would see on a stage in a major concert performance, but we configured it so you can actually film and create extended reality. The stage is really only 20 feet, but it looks like a massive football field on camera.
So you've done the Zoom background on a big scale.
Pretty much.
Notice that I've cleverly simulated my own home office as my Zoom background. So that is really fascinating, and we will come back to that. But I want to turn to Claire and your I would suggest very different world of challenges that come by way of being part of a massive governmental museum world, which, you know, the concept of pivoting quickly, it must be a little challenging. And
a little bit more challenging in the federal system, yes. If it is what, you know, basically it's the same word that we've been using as well. But I think a lot of it too is that for the Smithsonian being the 19 different museums that we have, as well as research centers, the National Zoo, there were a lot of different elements that had to basically be shut down immediately, and trying to get the entire staff of, you know, more than 7,000 people teleworking right away. And so those were some of the immediate challenges of, you know, but the secretary had his own directive of already starting to try and get more digital content, get the museums more out there online and virtual. And so it basically got accelerated through this process that luckily a lot of the museums had content already that was available. A lot of them are on the Google Art world. And so there were things that we could immediately, you know, send people to. But it was also then, you know, the priority was staff safety, visitor safety, making sure the animals are taken care of, making sure the art collections are secure, but doing it with essential staff only, minimal staff on site, and everybody else at home. And initially, you know, I was going back through emails this morning just to kind of refresh my memory, since it's been so many months now, you know, that initially we were talking, you know, oh, we'll be out for 30 days. So what can you do for the next 30 days? And then it quickly became 2 months. And then, you know, it's just been obviously expanding since then. But a lot of the educational staffs at the different units have been, you know, exponentially producing different programs, scholarly discussions, as well as some of, as you were talking about, some of the different topics that have come up, and they've been challenged to then talk about, you know, Black Lives Matter, and having different programming than had probably been on the radar to do this year. So making all of those changes, you know, having to store exhibitions that were supposed to have closed 2-3 months ago and just keep them on the walls, having to extend shows that are on the road and let those museums keep things on their, you know, on their walls. You know, shifting a lot of schedules, canceling shows, postponing shows, rescheduling postponed shows, and new shows to the schedule, so that hopefully when we are reopening, we have the material on, you know, exhibitions coming up that will again address some of those newer topics that have come up, and trying to get some more things. So we're still creating as well, you know, both virtually and for on-site materials that hopefully will be, you know, we just did reopen the zoo and the largest air and space museum at the Center last month at the very end of July as kind of the test case. You know, we're doing it with e-ticketing programs now, which we didn't have before. So you're limiting how many people are in the space. You're doing the social distancing. How does that work with the staff? How does that work with your you know, additional security that you have to make sure that people are keeping social distancing. You know, all of those different elements. How much more are you cleaning the museums and every touch surface? And so they've been kind of our test cases now, and we're waiting to see when does the next, you know, group open up, and how much can they do. So yeah, so it's reacting in a lot of different ways to just not being in with the art, but having to make that art available. I actually had to go into the museum a couple of weeks ago to film one of the shows that won't be seen again by the public. And so we are trying to then capture the exhibitions in a way that we will still be able to make them available. It was open for 2 weeks before the shutdown. We've had, I think, 4 shows that closed early because of the shutdown. Won't be seen by the public again. We had one totally canceled because it included Australia loans. So obviously travel bans, couriers, that type of thing is affecting exhibitions. We postponed 4, anywhere from 5 months to 3 years on the schedule, because the, you know, curatorial research couldn't happen, and so the scholarship couldn't be done. We're keeping some of our plan is to keep some of the floors closed when we do reopen, to reduce how many people come in and what spaces have to be cleaned and all of that. So it's impacting what the future plan and what the new normal is going to look like as well, once we are able to actually reopen to the public.
And you alluded to this, but I wanted to be more specific about it. You are making some content available now, right, through digital platforms. Can you talk just a little bit more about that, and maybe point us to where we might go if we hunger to see the full length portrait of President Obama, for example, or any of the other famous portraits in the
right. So all of our portraits are available.
Yes.
And this is one of the things actually launched right before we did across the Smithsonian, is that open access became available across the Smithsonian, where a lot of the materials, a lot of images of all of the collections across the Smithsonian are now available for you through open access. And you can just go to the smithsoniansi.edu site to kind of get to that. The npg.si.edu site is where you'll find everything about the portrait gallery. And we do have, I think they're calling it Visit at Home. And so there's a lot of, our podcasts, there's the access to the Google Art links, there's programs that we've done, including art classes that used to be held, once a week in the galleries, are now being done virtually online with an artist. They have had some scholarly discussions. It was the 10th anniversary of one of our more infamous exhibitions called Hide Seek that had a big issue of censorship about 10 years ago. So that 10th anniversary came up, and they're in the process now of doing a series of talks with the original curators for that. One held yesterday with the, one of the regents and Lonnie Bunch, the head of the Smithsonian, about, what is censorship like in art? So continuing some of those conversations, but also linking to some of our other sister institutions in terms of with Black Lives Matters. We have the African American History and Culture Museum has How Do You Talk About Race? And so linking across the institutions to what resources are available between each other and making those available through all of our web access, and doing just slideshows if we can't even get the art up, doing visual art slideshows with the exhibition labels.
So there's a lot of I would say
podcasts,
new ways, ways that were maybe in the works, but also some new ways of accessing the content.
Yes.
And we did the same thing with the College of Visual and Performing Arts and our 2 art centers. So we created a brand called Mason Arts at Home, and launched our first program as early as April 2nd, I think. So we weren't down very long, and we have found we did about 80 different events over the spring and summer, and it will pick up again in the fall. We found that we reached thousands of people that we would not otherwise have reached certainly on even some individual events reached 4,000 or 5,000 people, which an international audience, which would not have been possible.
And a lot of educational material too that would have normally just been available to teachers is now being made more available to the parents who are now teaching their kids at home.
Yes,
right?
yes,
so a lot
exactly.
of that stuff is being made accessible as well.
So to honor our hosts in another way, the School of Business, I want to ask both of you a sort of a business question, and that is, what has this moment done to your business model? How have you had to change your approach to institutional and or personal business practices to make it work? And once again, we'll go back to Hollywood for the first answer.
I think for us, it was really, the first thing was ensuring everybody's safety. We knew we had to continue to work. We had to figure out, we have one member of the Black Eyed Peas who is a cancer survivor. So we made a pact with him that we would only allow a certain amount of people in the bubble. So there's about 10 of us that work in the 60,000 square foot facility when it's normally 200. So, in the bubble, we've been trying to figure out how to get things done and all working together to get it done. And then also it's hard when you're in a bubble and you're working with essential workers. How do you engage the people who are not in the bubble that are still on your team? So that's been a little bit harder for us. And we've really, been heavily focused on Zooms and, different ways to keep people in the loop. But it's been a challenge. And, for our peers, every week, last week's CA, which is a leading agency in the business, they eliminated 750 positions. And yesterday, NBC Universal just announced that they're eliminating at least 20% of their force. So we're starting to really see the effects of the last couple months now. I think it's the first wave. I think that the longer this lasts, the more that will be affected. But yeah, for us, it's just been trying to stay positive, trying to find ways to get the content out. There's so much content out there. So trying to find ways to penetrate, to make sure your content's actually seen once it is put out. And, just being nimble. being nimble and knowing that you never know what's going to happen that day, and just be ready to move.
And how much of your collaborative process is able to be done in a distributed electronic environment? Can you actually? I mean, there's such a I mean, we use these tools, better and better, I think, with each passing week. But there is something about working in the theater and music or production that is so much about being together in a room and solving problems on the fly and sparking off of each other's creative energy. Have you found a way to simulate that or
Yeah, to be
keep
honest,
it going?
the superhero for COVID for us has been Zoom. We found that we can record off of Zoom. We do podcasts, because we're doing a podcast and we can't have people come in. So we've been, doing all of our recording, both visually and, audio off of Zoom. The quality is fantastic. We've had backups on phones, but, we found that Zoom has been our saving grace, and we use it pretty much all day, every day.
That's great. And Claire, what's it like now from the museum's point of view to because you are a business as well as a cultural institution,
Right.
How are you adapting?
Well, I think, again, one of the foremost priorities for the secretary was to make sure that the staff nobody was fired, that we retained staff. We didn't have to do layoffs. And I know that we are very lucky from that standpoint, because there are a lot of museums across the country and across the world that are, furloughing and reducing staffs, and that hit pretty quickly, for a lot of them. And so, I think being that we have, part of our funding is federal, we had at least a portion that was already taken care of. We are also trust funded though, and there's a lot of trust staff. And so it was that income level, that income resource, while there are some endowments, it was also the museum shops and the restaurants and the just the general, there are general donation boxes in the museums, but even special events that they would hold in the buildings that were resources of revenue. So a lot of those things are impacting how we're planning next fiscal year. And we're in the process now of working on that budget. We have an October to September fiscal year, so cutting back things this year as well as reducing next year to make sure that we are hopefully not having to furlough and release any staff, and that we can, just maybe have to reduce some of the on-site programming, find different ways to still sell some of those same stories, but make sure that, the staff is of utmost priority for the secretary to make sure that we can maintain that, as well as also the same thing with, keeping, high-risk staff safe. And how do you deal with that? How do you keep them on staff and keep them working in a different environment if they can't come physically to the office? Right now, we're all basically being told, if you can telework and stay home, you are staying home through the end of the year. If you have to come into the building, it's for very short periods of time. And if there's anything that, you can't do because of your health, they're working that out with staff and trying to make sure that they are taken care of. So those were kind of the biggest things, that the administrative part of things, from just a general working process in terms of production of exhibitions and that type of thing. Yeah, we used to get in the room together. We'd do layouts with the curators and the designers, and we'd sit there and we'd look at the objects in the layout. And now we're trying to figure out, how do we do layouts for new shows that haven't been done yet? And so it is a little bit more difficult, where it's like, okay, here's the first layout design from the designers to then send to the curators, and everybody kind of looks and makes comments, and you send it all back. So the processes are going to be a little bit longer. We're still developing all of that right now. But I think, luckily we had several of those meetings prior to the shutdown. And so now it's just tweaking a few things to get us through maybe early January, March area. And, but it's after that where we're, now having to figure out how do we keep that moving while we're still, in this kind of virtual world of trying to have meetings. Teams has been a big thing for the Smithsonian. We are doing Zoom, GoToMeetings. There's very different options that we've been using to try and see what works best. But that is the way, you know, we're having staff meetings that way. We'd actually started that before we left the building. We tested it out before we left the museum to see that everybody could get online and, you know, make sure that we were all able to see each other and talk to each other when we had to.
Wow. I want to remind our listening audience, viewing audience, that we have channels open for questions, and there's a chat feature, and then there's a Q&A feature on your Zoom screen, and we are monitoring both. So if you have a question for either of the panelists or for me, please feel free to type it up there, and we will get to it if and as we can. I'd like to take this moment now and just pivot a little bit, to use that word of the day, to that other crisis that we are experiencing. Some commentators, I think, have wisely called it the other pandemic, the pandemic of racism that is deeply encoded into our society, and that white America and institutional America, which are very often overlapping circles on a Venn diagram, which is one of the issues that's being explored, I think, nationally. It is a time of introspection, but also a time of reckoning. It's a time where institutions are being called to really think differently and more consistently about these questions. And I just wonder, from your various perspectives, again, from your perspectives as practitioners in two different vital components of the American arts sector, how the coincidence, and I'm using that word in its very literal sense, not to minimize anything, but the coincidence of a global medical pandemic and then the upwelling of awareness of something that was there all along, but is finally inescapable to our notice. How those two things are interrelated. I know that we're finding that a daily theme. So once again, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind kicking that off, and we'll talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll start taking some of these questions.
So I guess for us, you know, we've always kind of worked in and around social justice issues. You know, the first thing that we did was right post 9/11, we did a song called "Where's the Love?"
Yeah.
Which, who knew that stand was going to stand up and kind of be the theme for everything still today.
It was on one of my social media feeds today. I can't remember which platform, but it suddenly had popped up again. So
yeah, and then we relaunched the song a couple summers ago, and there was that horrific summer where everybody from Philando Castile to, you know, Michael Brown, you know, just there was so many police deaths that happened that summer. So we relaunched the song then, and that was great. But then, you know, when it happened again this summer, we just felt like we were living this nightmare all over again. But for us, like, we always see in times like this, the arts are probably more important than ever. Our history has been told through the arts, through, you know, through photography, through singing, through poetry, you know, writing, just everything. That's how our history has always been told. So for us, like, we see no excuse. Like, everyone should be out there and being creative. Anybody can be a content producer today. Everyone has a computer. Everybody has a phone. That's all you need. So for us, like, we were like, okay, well, we have to support this issue because we've been supporting it for a long time. What can we do? So we just jumped in. We've been working with, you know, pretty much so many organizations on this. We were out at the protests. We got shot by the police with rubber bullets. The protests came right in front of our building where the cops were attacking people, like literally right in front of our building. So we were surrounded by it. It was hard for us because, you know, I wasn't here for the Watts riots. That was a year, maybe 2 years before I got here. But for everyone in LA, they felt like it was the Watts riots all over again. So things have calmed down. There's still protests every day. There's a lot of amazing content coming out. I think we're going to see a lot more, especially on the long form. But, you know, I don't know what else to say. The only thing that's been difficult for us is, you know, another issue that's really important to us is gun control and gun safety. And we have this amazing documentary that was supposed to come out this summer, But in March, there were more gun sales in 1 month than there were in the last 5 years in this country. So now we're having difficulty actually getting this film out because people are scared to put out a film about gun control. So that's the only negative thing that we've been dealing with. We still really believe in this film. It will come out. We're still hosting screenings, but you know, the theme is just push through and tell the history through the arts. That's where we can have a voice, you know?
And the sense of that's very inspiring. The fact that we're in there's this other thing happening in society that's, you know, the global pandemic, but also the economic destabilization that's followed from that, makes a lot of people that have a historical consciousness, you know, think of other periods of turmoil in history, and there's a pretty clear association between periods of turmoil in history and upwellings of great arts that end up lasting, you know, that are of the moment and commenting on the moment and helping people understand the moment in the moment, but then commenting for generations and centuries beyond. And I think we are likely to see that as well. And you've just given us some examples.
Yeah, and the one thing I do want to say is, you know, in the news, we see so many negative things about these protests. My personal experience, except for the overeager, you know, police that are been out there, and I think they've calmed down a bit. There's so much love on the street. There's so much love, and people are supporting each other. Yes, there's some bad infiltrators. There's always going to be an asshole in every group, as my mom says. But the love and the teamwork, and I mean, there's so much beauty coming out of this moment. Like, we just need to look at that as well. We have a lot of work to do, but I think it's really bringing our country together in a different way. And, you know, I think, you know, people just need to get out there and fight for what they believe in. And, you know, if you're a content creator, this is the time.
Great. And I hope everybody's taking notes on that. Claire, you started to mention earlier that there was some programming discussions that were taking on some new directions. Could you expand on that, or anything else that addresses this theme?
Well, in actual, it's kind of interesting because we had actually already been trying to start to refresh even our own galleries, and that was on our books 3 or 4 years ago to start the process, because the history of portraiture is very elite. You know, we see a lot of white faces on our walls, and we've been trying to be more diverse and more inclusive in how we tell our own story and the story of this country. And so it's kind of, you know, a direction we had already been pursuing. A lot of the programming that we're doing online right now is with a lot of the artists that were part of our Outwin Portrait competition, which is currently on the wall. Those are held every 3 years, and the messages that came in the portraiture that the contemporary artists had created for this particular competition were a lot about, you know, some of it was gun control violence, some of it was immigration, a lot of immigration issues. And so they were, you know, things that were happening 3 years ago, and we're just getting ready to now launch our portrait competition for 22. So I anticipate that a lot of the content that we're going to see from that in that competition is going to relate to what's happening right now. And so, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what material, you know, arises from the artists when we start pulling that competition gets launched in October, I believe. But there's also just internally, we are still struggling with that. You know, I think a lot of our industries aren't very diverse. They aren't inclusive in staffing, in programming. And so, you know, a lot of the museums are doing diversity, equity, inclusion committees now. They're trying to get those programs set up within the museums. We're also trying to bring in more training for the staff. You know, our director, one of her priorities when she came on 7 or 8 years ago now was to make sure that what we're acquiring for the gallery is at least, you know, 25% has to be, or 50%, I can't remember what her number is now, is, you know, diverse people, that we're expanding the collections and making sure that those faces are being seen and those voices are being heard through what's on our walls and those stories. And so I think, you know, we're going to be able to see more of it now, but because I think, as you said, there's more people on the streets who are of every color in this moment talking to these movements. And it's not just one culture that's bringing the voice anymore. And so I think that's a totally different time, for us right now.
Yeah.
And there's many more faces bringing this topic and this theme to the forefront.
I think that's beautifully said. And as someone who is the head of exhibitions at the Portrait Gallery, the use of the word faces as a metaphor is so appropriate. I mean, it really matters whose faces you see that tell those stories. We're starting to get some great questions, and I'm going to jump first to actually Victoria Lord's question, which is primarily for Sarah, and I'm going to paraphrase it because it's long and eloquent, but it has to do with the business side of the music industry. How do you suggest independent bands and musicians allow themselves to be viable acts for the venues to bring on when they start opening up again? In other words, what are some of the things that individual artists or ensembles can do to be ready to be bookable and presentable when we're back open?
Unfortunately, from the intel that we're hearing, we should be in Europe right now on tour, and we just had to cancel our entire year. We are scheduling for summer 2021, but everybody is telling us that we should be prepared to not be touring until 2022. Obviously, we don't know, it's day by day, but we're not going to have touring for a long time. And as far as venues with performances, I don't know when that's going to happen. It's not anytime soon. So my suggestion for anybody in the music side of it, there's so many outlets to go online and perform and shoot your own shows. You can shoot them off an iPhone or iOS, Android, doesn't matter. You can upload it on your computer, and you can. There's different platforms. I mean, Twitch is probably the best platform out there right now for live music. You can do stuff on YouTube, you can do a Facebook Live, but right now it's just keeping that engagement up and performing and it's not easy, trust me, it's not easy to perform and you don't have fans in the room and you can't feel the energy, but that's our reality right now. Do a Facebook Live, get online, explore these other platforms, and you can be on all the platforms at the same time. Technology allows you to do it. So just, don't stop. That's the only way the venues are going to see, because they are going to be checking your engagement, and keep your social media numbers up, but don't stop performing.
Yeah, I'll underscore that as someone with a venue platform. We are looking all the time and keeping our eyes open in the media. Real quick follow up, and then I want to get to a question for Claire because about the fundraising question, if you've seen that one come through. But a quick follow up on this, and it actually relates to another question that was asked. How do you get, first of all, how do you make these things high quality? That was embedded in the previous question that we got over the chat. And then how do you get paid for this content? I realize that's two different questions, but I wonder if you have a quick answer for either one. How do you get paid when you're out there on Twitch or Facebook or?
How do you get paid? Oh, so that's
me. That's for you.
So you really are, the only place where you're really going to make money is on YouTube, and you have to really get your numbers up, and then YouTube will start paying you because they'll leverage advertising against your content. But as far as like Twitch and some of the other platforms, you're not going to get paid. But what you are going to do is you use that as marketing for yourself. You really have to focus on getting your Facebook, getting your Instagram and your Twitter numbers up, because the way to actually get paid right now is through brands. Brands' marketing budgets have not been hit. They're still trying to find smart ways to put their brands out there and talent to attach to. So if they see your numbers going up and your engagement with your fans is high, that's how some of that corporate money can go towards you to create the content and to keep it moving forward. There's also plenty of grants out there. It's different state by state. Apply for grants. Apply for, there's a second round of PPE loans that comes through. Or PPP, sorry. Go for some of those loans. I mean, that's what it's there for. Claire could probably speak more on the government side of it, because that's not something that I have expertise in, but there's money out there. You just have to be smart and find it. But more importantly, connect with your audience, continue to be consistent with content, and, just don't stop, because who knows when the world's going to go back to normal.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful. And a good segue, because I wanted to pick up the question about virtual fundraisers. Speaking of raising money, we all know the tried and true traditional methods, which are event-driven and gala-driven and so on. What are your folks in the Smithsonian world doing to?
I'm not sure.
That?
Unfortunately, that's the answer to that, because I'm not in that part of the development side of things. I do know that we are keeping current members engaged with virtual programming. So some of they've been doing curatorial talks, and we had one for Marian Anderson that was one of the exhibitions we had on view that got closed on Marian Anderson, but it was that we had Denise Graves come in and sing some of the songs that Marian Anderson had sung. And so, there's those kind of programs that they're doing to keep engaged the sponsors and the members that we already have on board. But they are still fundraising for exhibitions in the normal way. The gala, luckily we don't have one this year. Our next one is next fall, and hopefully we'll be able to have it. But beyond that, a lot of those, they're doing, from what I have seen, what little I have seen, it's a lot of different ways of just keeping those sponsors and those prior donors engaged. And hopefully letting them know, once we get back to having things online, this is what we're going to be able to do for you.
Great. Now, we've had a couple questions about the idea of career focus in this time, and several different ways of asking the question, but basically, either as a current student or somebody about to graduate or a new professional in the field, looking at the current moment, what do you say? What advice would you have for in your respective areas for someone who's starting out or thinking about entering this field? And we'll go back to Sarah for the first round.
Well, it's a little tough right now in our industry for the foreseeable future. But I think the one thing that is lacking with a lot of people coming out of the arts is not enough background in marketing. Marketing and distribution are just as important as creating content. And that demand is never going to change. It's only going to get greater. So if you are in kind of that, about to graduate or recently graduating and trying to find things to do to kind of make yourself more attractive to the hiring staff out there, take some marketing classes, take some online classes, take a social media class. Like, there's so much out there that you can do and you can learn from home right now, but just make yourself stand above, above the pack. That's how you're going to get hired. And I also, like, if you're just coming out of college, the best thing that I probably did was to start at an agency. I worked at William Morris Agency. It was really hard, but it was the best general overview of the industry for me. So it was a great situation. I mean, they don't pay much. I had to work a little side job to pay my rent, but it was a great education. It was grad school for me. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Claire?
Again, a lot, as I said, with a lot of the museums furloughing, I'm not sure how many museums are going to be, hiring right now. I do think that if there's the opportunity to do an internship and get your foot in the door somewhere and just get the experience, that's always a great opportunity to just see for yourself what it is that you really want to make sure that you understand what goes on in that particular field, and that is really where you want to be. But it also gives you the opportunity to, especially like in my office of exhibitions, where we touch on every single part of an exhibition and work with design to catalog to publicity to, advancement. We're touching a lot of different areas of what different work in the museum. And so I think getting those experiences, if the hiring isn't there, but at least getting your foot in the door they can see what you can do as well. What could you bring to that institution to help them, keep moving forward. I think that's always going to be a way to at least stay within the field.
Sort of an interesting tangential but related question has come in about actually from someone who graduated from Mason last year and was an intern with the Portrait Gallery, about the challenges of working with the Office of Government Relations and International Relations to acquire works and also to ensure their proper care and curation, I guess specifically on the international front.
Yeah, I mean, obviously right now, any kind of international loans aren't really happening. We've had to basically cancel some of our outgoing loans because we do require couriers, as well as most international museums will require a courier to us. And that was actually quite challenging for the exhibition that we had to close after 2 weeks because half of that show came from London or came from England. And so we actually are working, and actually to be quite honest, our international relations office doesn't impact us too much from that standpoint. When we're doing exhibitions, we are pretty much working directly with the museums themselves. International relations really comes in more when we have things like an embassy overseas wants to borrow a painting for an embassy or something like that, or they're working with a local government to bring a show in. That's where we deal with international relations pretty much. Government relations, again, as well, doesn't really, we work with them when we get requests from the Hill about particular exhibitions or something that we're working on, and we provide them with answers on content, or, if there's questions that come from a constituent through Congress. That's really our kind of impact with government relations. We do, when we have our traveling shows on the road, we do make sure that the congressional representatives from those particular areas where the shows are going know that we're there and that we're in their region, and that we're, so they get invited to openings and that kind of stuff. So that they do see that we are impacting not just locally DC, with the majority of the Smithsonian being on the East Coast, but that we're reaching out across the country, and we're trying to get into every audience that we can, and make sure that we're getting across so that they know that, the money that we get from Congress is working in their neighborhoods.
And you alluded to a controversy of 10 years ago or so. How frequent, and with political repercussions perhaps, how frequent is that in your world, either to a specific work or to the mission of the museum in general? I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but if you could be. Yeah,
for Portrait Gallery, it's not, we get it every once in a while. Something happens from that standpoint, but it's not necessarily Congress. It's more Congress reacting to some constituency that has, sent a letter to them. So I think they understand that the Smithsonian is really trying to be as nonpartisan as possible in our interpretations, and really trying to reach all audiences. And so I think, our government relations office, and I think Secretary Bunch has really got a good relationship now with Congress. And so I think they understand, they get most of what we do.
That's great. I want to give you each about 30 seconds to offer a closing remark, and then we're going to bring Brett back in. Oh, there he is. He popped in all by himself, but he's going to close us out. But I just wanted to hear from each of you with any closing thoughts or reflections about the moment, or about the next moment maybe in your work. Sarah?
I mean, I think what this moment has showed us is that we always have to be prepared, and we always have to be ready to pivot. The theme of this talk. The other thing is, in the arts, it's an expression that's heard all the time. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So networking is incredibly important to be in our industry. I'm sure Claire's also on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. If anybody ever has any questions about production or how to work in this new environment, I encourage you to reach out. Like, I'm here. We're all going to get through this. It's going to be 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this and say, wow, we got a lot of shit done. This is amazing. So that's all I have to say. Just stay positive. This is a new challenge, and we're all learning. Learning's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
pretty much the same.
Words to live by.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that Sarah just said. It's a new challenge. It's something that's, keeping us all on our toes, even though, we're all separated. We are still working, and we're still creating, and we're still making things happen. If it's not on site, it's virtually. And, keep doing that and stay connected.
Thank you. So nice to reconnect with both of you in this forum, and we will keep it going. Brett, thanks for having us on.
Yes, thanks, Brett.
Thank you all. And Dean Davis, thank you very much. Sarah and Claire, thank you all for the comments. I would maybe echo one of Sarah's comments. I have zero musical talent or artistic talent, yet it is something that you see our history written through that expression, the music we listen to, the shows we watch, the art, the poetry, just thinking of those great 19th century poets and how much I still quote Walt Whitman and Thoreau and all the people who are going through things. I know I had a conversation with my father-in-law who only listens to 1970s music because in his mind, that's the best music. And I said, what are we going to see coming out of this? Because for me, CCR and Fortunate Son was such a formative kind of thing about learning about Vietnam. What's going to be this generation's music and the stories that we tell through art? I think it's just going to be fascinating in the next couple of years, whether it's through, music and TV or Claire, through our artistic expression through, portraits of others. Do want to just thank you all for taking so much time. Dean Davis, as an associate professor in marketing, I think we need to talk about some more art and marketing integration programs and courses. Love to continue that.
Right.
Completely
Absolutely.
with that brands are looking for this and how you make those connections. Want to thank all the audience for the great questions for the panelists. Obviously, some really deep content that you've asked around career advice. The Alumni Association wants to be there for you for this. I know that either through them or even my office, executive development, we make a commitment at Mason, and something I'm very proud of this institution, that when you leave, you are not truly gone from Mason. We want to be there to provide the resources and the education you need. Too many schools, the Alumni Association only calls you when they want money. That's not what we're about as we look at how Mason is trying to look at lifelong learning. And so this is not just a School of Business kind of sponsored event, but it really is for the university and for our alumni.
We want money too, though.
I'll let the dean ask that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Everybody have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there and enjoy the rest of the week.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.